Dear brothers and sisters, you know I have never recommended a video for you to listen to, but I sincerely recommend this one for you. God shows himself mighty in our time for a reason, to let the hidden reckon with Jesus as the only way to God. But beyond that, it is for you and I to remain undistracted in faith. I call on you to carefully watch till the end. Pick any of the sections God presses on your heart and share your views and prayers, or just share your location in the comments. By doing so, other believers around the world can connect with you and share perspectives in love. My name is Fadila, and I want to tell you how Jesus found me in the most unexpected place, in a mansion in Cairo, Egypt, where I grew up surrounded by wealth but empty inside. When I look at my hands today, they are free hands, no longer weighed down by the heavy gold bracelets I used to wear. Sometimes I still cannot believe that everything that happened to me was real, but it was, and I need to tell you this story so you can understand the miracle of where I am now. I was born into a very wealthy family in Egypt. My father owned many businesses and our family was well known in our community. We lived in a huge house with guards at the gate, beautiful gardens, and rooms so big you could get lost in them. I had everything a young girl could want: expensive clothes, toys from other countries, private teachers, and a life that looked perfect from the outside. But there was something missing inside me that I could not explain, like a hole in my heart that nothing could fill no matter how much I had. My childhood followed the same pattern every single day. I would wake up in my large bedroom, eat breakfast prepared by our cook, study with my tutors, play in the garden with my younger brother Kareem, and then evening prayers with my family. We were Muslim, and religion was a very important part of our lives. 5 times a day we would stop everything to pray. During Ramadan we would fast, and we memorized verses from the Quran. I did everything I was supposed to do, but I never felt anything real when I prayed. It was like going through motions without understanding why, and deep inside I felt alone even when surrounded by my whole family. As I grew older, around the age of 10 or 11, I started noticing things that confused me about the world I lived in. I saw how differently my brother Kareem was treated compared to me and my sisters. He could go outside to play with friends in the neighborhood, he could ride his bicycle down the street, he could laugh loudly and run freely. But my sisters and I had to stay inside the compound most of the time. We had to be quiet and modest, and we were always told that our behavior reflected on the family honor. I loved my parents and I knew they cared for us, but I started wondering why God would make rules that seemed so different for boys and girls. There were other things that troubled me too. I noticed that some of the people who worked in our house, the gardeners and housekeepers and drivers, were treated like they were less important than us. They worked very hard every day, sometimes from early morning until late at night, but they lived in small rooms behind our house and ate different food from what we ate. My father would speak kindly to them sometimes, but other times he would barely look at them when giving orders. I remember once asking my mother why our housekeeper Amina looked so sad all the time, and my mother told me not to worry about such things, that Amina was blessed to work for a good family like ours. But I could see that Amina missed her own children who lived far away in a village, and my heart hurt for her. I tried to push these questions down and be a good daughter. I studied hard, I helped my mother with my younger siblings, I memorized my prayers, and I did everything that was expected of me. But at night when I was alone in my room, I would lie awake wondering if this was all there was to life. I would pray the prayers I had been taught, asking for guidance and peace, but I never felt like anyone was listening. The ceiling of my bedroom felt like a barrier that my prayers could not pass through, and I would eventually fall asleep feeling empty and confused. I did not know then that God was already seeing me, already hearing the cries of my heart, already preparing to answer me in a way I could never have imagined. When I was 12 years old, something happened that turned my whole world upside down. It was during the summer, a hot June night when I had gone to bed feeling especially lonely and sad. I had gotten into an argument with my mother earlier that day because I had asked why we could not visit my friend Miriam, who was a Christian Coptic girl from school. My mother had been very upset and told me that we needed to be careful about who we spent time with, that our faith was the most important thing, and that I should not question these matters. I went to bed that night crying quietly into my pillow, feeling like I was trapped in a life I did not understand, and I whispered into the darkness asking if there was anyone who truly cared about how I felt. That night I had a dream that was more real than any dream I had ever experienced before. I found myself standing in a garden filled with flowers I had never seen, with colors so bright and beautiful they almost seemed to glow. The air felt different, lighter and cleaner, and I felt a peace wash over me that I had never known in my waking life. I was wearing a simple white dress instead of my usual clothes, and my feet were bare on the soft grass. I felt no fear at all even though I did not know where I was, and then I saw someone walking toward me through the garden. He was a man dressed in white, and there was something about him that made my heart feel like it would burst with joy and love all at the same time. He came close to me and looked at me with eyes full of such kindness and love that I started crying immediately. He called me by my name and told me that I was deeply loved, that I was precious and known completely. No one had ever looked at me the way he looked at me, like I mattered more than anything in the world. He told me that he had been calling me, that he wanted me to know the truth, and that if I sought him I would find rest for my soul. I did not understand everything he was saying, but I felt something breaking open inside my chest, like a door I did not know existed was being opened for the first time. When I woke up the next morning, my pillow was wet from tears and my whole body was shaking, but I felt more alive than I had ever felt before. I knew that dream was not just a normal dream, it was something real, and I could not stop thinking about it no matter how hard I tried. The days after that dream were some of the hardest of my life because I could not forget what I had experienced. I went through my normal routines, studying with my tutors, eating meals with my family, playing with my siblings, but inside I felt like a completely different person. The garden from my dreams stayed vivid in my mind, and I kept seeing the face of that man with the kind eyes whenever I closed my eyes. I tried to pray using the prayers I knew, asking for understanding, but the words felt empty compared to what I had felt in that dream. I knew something had changed in me, but I did not know what it meant or what I was supposed to do about it. About a week after the dream, I did something that I knew was risky. I had a tablet that my parents had given me for schoolwork, and late one night when everyone was asleep, I started searching for answers. I typed in descriptions of what I had seen, about dreams of men in white and gardens and feelings of love and peace. Most of the results that came up were about spiritual experiences in Islam, but then I saw something that made my heart start beating very fast. There were stories from people, many of them from Muslim backgrounds like mine, who described dreams of someone they identified as Jesus. I read story after story of people who said that Jesus had appeared to them in dreams and visions, calling them to follow him. I was terrified when I realized what this might mean. In my family and community, Jesus was respected as a prophet, but nothing more. We were taught that Christians had changed the message, that they were wrong to call Jesus the Son of God, and that Islam was the final and complete truth. But these stories I was reading were from people who sounded sincere and honest, people who had risked everything because of dreams like mine. I spent hours that night reading, being very careful to delete my search history afterward, and by the time the sun started to rise I was more confused than ever. Part of me wanted to forget everything and just go back to my normal life, but another part of me, the part that had been awakened in that garden, knew I could not stop searching for the truth no matter where it led me. Over the next few months, I became like a detective searching for clues about who the man in my dream really was. I started paying more attention during my studies, especially when we learned about the prophets. When my Quran teachers spoke about Isa, which is what we called Jesus, I listened very carefully to every word. I learned that Muslims believed Jesus was born of a virgin, that he performed miracles, that he was sinless, and that he would return at the end of time. But I also noticed that our teacher never explained why Jesus was so different from all the other prophets, why he alone was born without a human father, why he alone had such power, and I began to wonder if there was more to his story than I was being told. I knew I needed to find a Bible, but this was extremely difficult in my situation. Bibles were not common in Egypt outside of Christian bookstores, and I could not go to those places without raising suspicion. Then I remembered something from school. There was a Coptic Christian girl in my class named Marian who I sometimes talked to during breaks. We were not close friends because our families moved in different circles, but she had always been kind to me. One day I gathered all my courage and asked her quietly if she knew where someone could read the Bible, just out of curiosity for learning about different religions. She looked at me with surprise and concern, and I could see her trying to decide if she could trust me. Finally, she whispered that there were Bible apps I could download on my phone or tablet, and she gave me the names of a few that had Arabic translations. That night I downloaded one of the apps, disguising it by changing the icon to look like a language learning program. My hands were shaking as I opened it for the first time and began reading the Gospel of Matthew. The words I read were completely different from anything I expected. I read about Jesus teaching that we should love our enemies, that God cares for us like a father cares for his children, that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the pure in heart. I read about him healing sick people, forgiving sins, and speaking with an authority that amazed everyone who heard him. As I read through the night, tears kept falling from my eyes because something inside me recognized truth in these words. This was not just history or religious rules. This was someone who understood the deepest hurts and longings of the human heart, and I felt like he was speaking directly to me across the centuries. For almost a year I lived two completely different lives at the same time. During the day I was Fadila, the obedient daughter who wore her hijab, said her prayers, and did everything expected of her. But at night I was someone else, a secret seeker reading the Bible on my tablet under my blankets, learning about Jesus and feeling my heart come alive in ways I had never experienced. I read through all four Gospels multiple times, and then I started reading the letters that came after them. I learned about grace, about forgiveness that was freely given not earned, about a God who loved me so much that he sent his Son to die for my sins. These ideas were so different from everything I had been taught, and yet they answered questions I had been asking my whole heart for years. The hardest part was not being able to talk to anyone about what I was discovering. I watched my family go through the motions of religious duties, and I wanted so badly to tell them about the joy and peace I was finding in reading about Jesus. But I knew I could not say anything, not yet, maybe not ever. I had heard stories whispered in our community about people who left Islam, and the words used to describe them were filled with anger and disgust. Apostates were considered worse than criminals, people who had betrayed not just their religion but their entire family and community. I knew that if anyone found out what I was doing, reading a Bible and questioning Islam, I would face consequences I could not imagine, and the fear of discovery was like a weight I carried every single day. Then something happened that made everything more real and more frightening. I had another dream, shorter than the first one but just as powerful. The same man appeared to me again in that beautiful garden, and this time he showed me his hands. I saw scars on them, marks that looked like they came from being pierced by something. He did not explain what the scars meant in the dream, but he told me that he had paid a great price for me, that he loved me enough to suffer for me, and that I needed to decide if I would follow him no matter what it cost. I woke up with my heart pounding, and I immediately searched on my tablet about the scars. That was when I learned about the crucifixion, about how Jesus had been nailed to a cross, about how Christians believed he died to pay for the sins of the world. I sat there in the darkness of my room, staring at the description of the crucifixion, and something clicked into place in my understanding. The man in my dreams was Jesus Christ, and he was calling me to follow him even though it would cost me everything. After that second dream, I knew I could not keep hiding forever. I was 13 years old now, and the truth burning inside me felt too big to contain. I started noticing how empty the prayers at the mosque felt compared to the conversations I was having with Jesus in my heart. Yes, I had started praying to Jesus, quietly in my mind throughout the day, talking to him like he was right there with me. I felt him responding not with words I could hear, but with peace that would wash over me, with thoughts that would come to my mind at exactly the right time, with a sense of presence that made me feel less alone. I knew this was real, more real than anything else in my life, but I also knew that acknowledging this truth openly would destroy everything I had ever known. I tried to find other Christians who might understand what I was going through. I paid more attention to Marian at school, and slowly over several months we became closer friends. I would ask her careful questions about her faith, about what Christians believed, about how she prayed. She was wise beyond her years and seemed to sense that my questions were more than just curiosity. One day when we were alone in the library, she asked me directly if I had been reading the Bible, and I could not lie to her. I told her yes, and I told her about my dreams. Her eyes filled with tears, and she took my hand and told me that Jesus was pursuing me, that he loved me, and that she would help me however she could. Having one person who knew my secret and did not reject me felt like the greatest gift in the world. Marian invited me to visit her church, but we both knew this was almost impossible. A Muslim girl visiting a Christian church would be noticed immediately, and word would get back to my family within hours in our community where everyone watched everyone else. Instead, Marian started bringing me small books about Christianity, hiding them in her school bag and passing them to me secretly. I would read these books late at night and then return them the next day. I learned about the early Christians who faced persecution, about people throughout history who had given up everything to follow Jesus, and about the promise that anyone who lost their life for Jesus would find true life. These stories both inspired me and terrified me because I knew I was heading toward a choice that would change everything forever. I managed to keep my secret for almost 2 years, living in constant fear of discovery but growing stronger in my faith with each passing month. Marian had connected me with a small group of believers who met secretly, mostly young people from Muslim backgrounds who had found Jesus. We would meet in different homes, never the same place twice, and we would worship together quietly, pray for each other, and study the Bible. These meetings became my lifeline, the only place where I could be completely honest about who I was becoming. But the strain of living a double life was crushing me slowly, and I knew something would have to give eventually. The breaking point came on an ordinary Thursday afternoon when I was 14 years old. My mother had asked to use my tablet because hers was not working, and in my tiredness I had forgotten to close the Bible app completely. She picked up my tablet from my desk while I was in the bathroom, and when I came back to my room I found her sitting on my bed staring at the screen with a look of horror on her face. The Bible app was open to the Gospel of John, and my mother was reading the words I had highlighted and noted. The silence between us felt like it lasted forever, and then she asked me in a shaking voice what this was and why I had a Christian Bible on my tablet. I could have made up a lie, could have said it was for a school project or that a friend had downloaded it as a joke, but I was so tired of lying and hiding that the truth just came out of me. I told my mother that I had been reading the Bible for 2 years, that I believed Jesus was more than just a prophet, and that I had given my heart to him. I watched her face change from shock to disbelief to a kind of grief I had never seen before. She started crying and asking me how this could have happened, where she had failed as a mother, what evil influence had corrupted me. She did not yell or hit me, but her tears and her pain felt worse than any anger. She told me that my father could never know about this, that it would destroy him and bring shame on our entire family. She begged me to renounce what I had said, to return to Islam, to forget this foolishness before it was too late. But when I told her quietly that I could not deny Jesus because he was the truth and the life, she stood up from my bed and left my room without another word, and I knew that everything was about to change. My mother told my father that same evening, and within an hour my entire family knew. My father came to my room with a face I had never seen before, a mixture of rage and shame and something that looked almost like fear. He asked me to repeat what I had told my mother, and when I confirmed that I believed in Jesus as the Son of God and could not deny him, he told me I had brought disgrace upon our family that could never be erased. My aunts and uncles were called to the house, and I sat in our formal living room surrounded by family members who looked at me like I had become a stranger. Living in turns trying to convince me to change my mind, stronger some with in my anger, faith with each passing month. some with
Marian
threats
had
about what would
connected me with a
happen if
small
word got
group of
out about my
believers who met
apostasy.
secretly.
For
Mostly
3
young
days they
people
kept me in the
Muslim
house under
backgrounds who
constant
had found
watch
Jesus.
while they decided what
We
to
would
do
meet
with me.
in different homes.
Religious
Never
teachers
the
were
same
brought to
place
speak
twice,
with me, and
to
we
show
would
me
worship
where I had
together
gone wrong,
quietly,
to
pray
explain
for
the
each other,
punishment for
and
leaving
study the
Islam.
Bible. But every
These
time
meetings
they spoke,
became my
I felt
lifeline,
Jesus
the
strengthening
only
me
place
from the
where I could be
inside,
completely
giving me
honest
courage
about
I
who
did
I was
not
becoming.
know I had,
But the
helping me
strain of
stand
living a
firm
double
even
life
when I
was
was
crushing me
terrified.
slowly.
I told
And I
them that
knew
I had
something would
found
have to
peace
give
in
eventually.
Jesus, that he had
The breaking
appeared to me
point
in
came
dreams
on an
that
ordinary
I could not
Thursday
deny
afternoon
what
when
I
was
knew to be
14
true.
years old.
On the
My
third
mother
night
had
my
asked to
father
use my
made his
tablet
decision.
because hers was not
He
working,
told me I was
and
no
in my
longer his
tiredness
daughter,
I had
that
forgotten
I had
to close
shamed
the
the
Bible
family
app
beyond
completely.
repair,
She
and that I
picked up
had
my
to
tablet
leave.
from my desk
He gave
while I
me a
was in the
small
bathroom,
amount of money,
and when I
told
came
me I
back
had
to my
24
room, I found
hours
her
to
sitting on my
disappear,
bed
and
staring
if I
at the
ever
screen with a
contacted
look
the
of
family
horror
again
on her
or
face.
told anyone our
The
name,
Bible app
there
was
would be
open to the
serious
Gospel of
consequences.
John.
And
My
my
mother
mother
was
cried
reading
as
the
I
words
packed a
I had
small bag
highlighted
with a
and
few
noted.
clothes and
The
necessities,
silence
but
between
she did
us
not
felt
try
like
to
it
stop my
lasted
father
forever.
or defend me.
And then she asked
My
me in
younger
a
brother
shaking
Kareem,
voice what
who
this
was only
was
10
and
years
why I
old,
had a Christian
watched from the
Bible on my
doorway with
tablet.
confused
I could have
tears in
made
his
up a
eyes,
lie,
not
could have said it was
understanding
for a
why
school
his sister
project
was leaving,
or that a friend had
I wanted to
downloaded
hug
it
him
as a joke,
goodbye, but
to
I
tell
was
him I
so
loved
tired of
him,
lying
but my
and
father
hiding that
would
the
not
truth
allow
just
it.
came out of me.
The next morning,
I
a
told my
driver
mother
took
that
me
I had
to a
been
part of
reading the
Cairo
Bible
for
for
2
2
years,
neighborhood and
that
left
I
me on a
believed
street
Jesus
corner with
was
my
more
bag
than
and
just
some
a
cash,
prophet,
and
and
that
I
I
had
had given
the car
my
drive
heart to
away
him.
knowing I would
I
never
watched her
see my
face
family
change from
again.
shock to
I was
disbelief
14
to a
years
kind of
old,
grief I had
alone
never
in a
seen
huge
before.
city with nowhere
She
to
started
go,
crying
but I was
and
not
asking
afraid
me how
because
this
I
could have
felt
happened.
Jesus
Where
right
she
there
had
with
failed
me.
as a mother,
I had lost
what evil
everything. My
influence had
family,
corrupted
my
me.
home, my
She
name,
did not yell
my
or hit
entire
me,
past life,
but her
but
tears
I
and
had
her
gained
pain
something
felt infinitely
infinitely more
anger.
valuable.
She told me
I
that
had
my father
Jesus,
could
and
never
he was
know about
enough.
this,
That
I
it would
wanted to tell you
destroy
what
him
happened
and bring
after I lost
shame on our
everything,
entire
because
family.
this is where you will
She
see
begged
how
me to
faithful
renounce what I
Jesus
had
truly
said,
is.
to return to
Marian
Islam,
and her
to
family
forget
kept this
me in when I had
foolishness
nowhere
before it
else
was
to
too
go,
late.
risking their
But when I
own
told her
safety to
quietly
shelter
that I
a
could not
Muslim
deny
girl who
Jesus
had
because
converted
he
to
was the
Christianity
truth and the life,
they treated
she
me
stood
like
up
their
from my
own
bed
daughter,
and left my
fed
room
me,
without another
clothed me,
word,
and
and
helped
I
me
knew that
navigate the
everything was about
dangerous
to
process
change.
of starting a new life. Through their church connections, I was eventually able to get new identity papers and find work helping in a Christian school. The years that followed were not easy. I faced discrimination, I lived with constant fear that someone from my old life would find me, and I grieved deeply for the family I had lost. But through it all, Jesus never left me. He provided for every need, He comforted me in every moment of loneliness, and He gave me a new family in the community of believers who surrounded me with love. Today I am 20 years old, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that Jesus was worth everything I gave up. The peace I have in Him is deeper than any comfort my wealthy childhood provided. The love I experience from my Father in heaven is greater than any earthly family could give. The purpose I have found in serving Him and helping other young people who are seeking truth fills me with joy that no amount of money or status could buy. I have been baptized publicly, I worship freely, I read my Bible without hiding, and I share my testimony with anyone who will listen. Yes, there is still pain when I think about my mother and siblings. Yes, there are nights when I cry for what I lost, but I would make the same choice again and again because knowing Jesus is the greatest treasure anyone could ever have. So I want to speak now to you, my brothers and sisters in Christ who are listening to this testimony. Please do not take your faith for granted or treat it lightly. You have the privilege of knowing Jesus, of reading His Word openly, of gathering with other believers without fear, and these are precious gifts that cost nothing less than the blood of Christ. Love one another deeply and sincerely, because the world will know we are His disciples by our love. Pray without ceasing, not just going through religious motions but actually talking to your Father who hears you and cares about every detail of your life. Study God's Word daily, because it is living and active and will transform you from the inside out. And if you know someone who is seeking, someone who has questions about Jesus, do not turn them away or judge them. Share the good news with gentleness and respect, remembering that you too were once far from God until His grace reached you. Jesus is real, He is alive, He is worthy of everything, and He will never fail those who put their trust in Him. This is my testimony, this is my song, and I pray it encourages your heart to follow Him with complete surrender and joy.